I never thought I'd live to see my name whispered in hushed voices paired with the word poison. The day the police showed up at my door, I was 35 years old, a woman who had spent most of her life trying to claw her way out of the shadows my family had cast over me. And yet somehow, those shadows had a way of finding me again, creeping back into my life like ghosts that refused to stay buried. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when they arrived. The sound of fists pounding against the door rattled the picture frames on my wall, and my stomach dropped before I even opened it. 2 officers stood there, their faces firm and unreadable, as if they had rehearsed the art of looking both sympathetic and suspicious at the same time. They asked if they could come inside. I didn't know what else to do but step aside, though my heart was already thrashing like a trapped bird. They didn't waste time. They told me there had been a report, a tip, something about dangerous substances, and then they found it. Small bottles, tucked neatly into a drawer in my room, filled with something I had never seen before. The word poison was tossed into the air so casually it made me choke. I kept insisting over and over that I had never bought it, that it wasn't mine, that someone had put it there. But my words sounded hollow in my own ears, like the desperate ramblings of someone trying to claw their way out of quicksand. Because the truth was, in my family, betrayal was currency, and setting each other up was a game we all knew too well. My name is Althea. I'm the second daughter in a family that never really wanted me. From the outside, maybe we looked like we had it together. Big suburban house, a father with a successful contracting business, a mother who attended every church service like she was born on the altar, and 2 siblings who were adored and spoiled in ways I could only dream of. But inside those walls, I was the mistake, the scapegoat, the one always left holding the shards of broken glass after someone else's lies shattered the truth. Growing up, I thought I could earn their love. I tried everything, bringing home good grades, volunteering for chores, never talking back, even when I was seething inside. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. My older brother, Marcus, was the golden child, the son who could do no wrong. He had a smile that charmed teachers, neighbors, anyone who crossed his path. But behind that smile was a darkness, a cruelty he reserved just for me. He'd steal money from my mother's purse and blame it on me. He'd break things in the house, whispering my name when the pieces were discovered. And each time my parents believed him without hesitation. Then there was my younger sister, Lydia. She was the princess, delicate and fragile, always shielded, always excused. If Marcus was the king, she was the jewel, and me, I was the servant girl. My place was to keep quiet, to endure, to let their versions of the truth become the only truth that mattered. By the time I reached adulthood, I had already learned that in my family, truth was a luxury I couldn't afford. And betrayal, well, betrayal was inevitable. So when the police found those bottles in my room, I wasn't surprised by the weight of suspicion that immediately pressed down on me. It wasn't the first time someone had framed me. But this time, it was bigger. This time, it could destroy me. The night before the raid, Marcus had visited. He hadn't been to my apartment in years. He showed up unannounced, claiming he wanted to check on me, that he'd heard I wasn't doing well. His voice was too sweet, too careful, like he was laying down sugar to cover poison. I should have known. I should have felt the trap snapping shut around me. But loneliness makes you vulnerable, and I let him in. We talked for hours, or rather, he talked and I listened. He asked about my job, my bills, my friends, or the lack of them. Every answer I gave seemed to make his eyes sharper, as if he was storing away pieces of me for later use. Before he left, he hugged me, which was strange enough, and I remember the way he looked around my room, his gaze lingering too long on the corners. Now, standing in front of 2 police officers as they held up bottles of poison from that same room, I could hear his voice in my head. You've always been the troubled one, Althea. People are bound to believe what they've always believed. And they did. They took me to the station. They asked me questions I couldn't answer. How did I get it? Who sold it to me? Why was it hidden in my room? Every I don't know only dug me deeper into the hole Marcus had buried me in. I felt like a child again, cornered, accused, with no one on my side. But here's the thing. When you've spent your whole life being underestimated, blamed, and discarded, you develop a resilience that borders on fire. And in that interrogation room, something inside me shifted. I knew if I didn't fight back, if I didn't find the truth, they would erase me completely. So I started talking, not about the bottles, but about my family. I told them about Marcus, about the years of lies, about the way Lydia and my parents always shielded him, no matter how much damage he caused. I could see the officer's skepticism softening, just a little. One of them even asked if anyone else had been in my apartment recently. I told them about Marcus's visit. Their pens scribbled notes, but notes weren't enough. I needed proof. The days that followed were the longest of my life. I was released, but not cleared. My name still lingered in whispers. My landlord eyed me suspiciously. My boss gave me unpaid leave until things were resolved. Friends stopped calling. And my family? They didn't call once. Not to ask if I was okay. Not to ask if I needed help. The silence was its own verdict. They wanted me to fall. I barely slept. My nights were filled with questions. Who had tipped off the police? How had Marcus managed to get those bottles into my room without me knowing? And most of all, what was he planning? Because Marcus never did anything without a reason. It was Lydia who slipped up first. One evening, she called me out of the blue. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Why would you do it, Althea?" She was crying, but her tone wasn't pity. It was accusation. I told her again that it wasn't me, that Marcus had set me up. But she snapped back. "Marcus said you confessed." I froze. Confessed? I had never confessed to anything. That's when I realized Marcus had already spun his web of lies, telling the family that I had admitted everything. That's why they hadn't called. That's why they stayed silent. They believed him again. But Lydia let something else slip. She said, "Marcus told us you wanted to hurt Mom and Dad. He said you were angry they never gave you anything." Her words cut deep because they weren't entirely wrong. I was angry, bitter even. But hurt them? Never. The seed of Marcus's plan was clear now. He wanted to paint me as dangerous, unhinged, a threat to the family. Maybe even to push me out of their lives for good. But why? Why now? The answer came a week later in the form of a letter addressed to me, but mistakenly delivered to my neighbor's mailbox. It was from my father's lawyer. Inside was a notice about changes to the family trust, with a meeting scheduled in 2 weeks. I wasn't supposed to know. But now I did, and suddenly, everything made sense. Marcus wasn't just trying to ruin me for fun. He was making sure I was disqualified, legally and morally, from any claim to the family's wealth. Poison in my room? A supposed confession? It wasn't just about destroying my reputation. It was about erasing me from the inheritance completely. The realization lit a fire in me like nothing before. They wanted to erase me? I would show them I couldn't be erased, but to do that, I had to get ahead of Marcus. I had to gather evidence, not just my word against his. And I had to move fast, before that meeting, before my name was crossed out of every document that tied me to my family. I started with my apartment building. I spoke to the security guard, begged him to check the camera footage from the night Marcus visited. At first he refused, saying only management could authorize it. But desperation can be persuasive, and eventually he let me watch. There it was, Marcus carrying a bag, entering my apartment late at night. Hours later, leaving without it. That footage was my lifeline. But would it be enough? Would the police believe me over him? The night I got that footage, I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the screen. The rain tapped on the window, just like the night they came for me. I could feel my chest tightening, my pulse quickening. This wasn't just about inheritance anymore. This was about survival. Because if Marcus was willing to frame me for poison, what else was he capable of? And for the first time, I asked myself a terrifying question. What if the poison wasn't just for me? I couldn't shake the thought that maybe Marcus wasn't simply trying to set me up for disinheritance. What if the bottles he planted in my room weren't just props in his twisted play, but part of something much darker? My family had always underestimated how far Marcus would go. I knew better. I had grown up watching him twist lies until they became everyone else's truth, watching him break things and walk away with a clean smile while I picked up the blame. If he could orchestrate all of this just to cut me out of money that was never fairly mine to begin with, then he could orchestrate anything. I remember staring at the grainy footage of him sneaking out of my apartment, his silhouette hunched with the weight of that bag. My hands were trembling as I paused and rewound the clip again and again, like maybe if I studied it long enough, I'd find a message hidden in the frame. What I found instead was a reminder of the way he had always haunted me. His shadow lingered over my life like a permanent stain, and no matter what I did, it followed. The next morning, I called the detective assigned to my case. I told him about the footage, begged him to come see it. When he finally arrived and watched it, he raised an eyebrow, but he didn't look convinced. "It proves he was there," he said, "but it doesn't prove he planted anything." The frustration burned hot in my chest. I wanted to scream. Wasn't it obvious? Who else would have put poison in my room? Who else had everything to gain from my ruin? But screaming wouldn't change his mind, so I swallowed it, clutched my hands tight until my nails dug crescents into my palms. I knew then that if I wanted justice, I couldn't rely on the police. I'd have to go after Marcus myself. The family trust meeting was my deadline. 2 weeks. 2 weeks to find evidence solid enough to burn through the lies Marcus had spun around me like a spider's web. I started with Lydia. My little sister had always been fragile, pliable, easy to sway. I knew Marcus had already poisoned her mind against me, but I also knew Lydia wasn't strong enough to carry secrets for long. Secrets ate her alive. I asked her to meet me at a cafe, neutral ground. When she walked in, her eyes darted around nervously, like even being seen with me was dangerous. She sat down stiffly, folding her hands in her lap. "Lydia," I said softly, "I need you to tell me the truth. Did Marcus talk to you about the poison before the police came?" Her eyes widened. She looked down, twisting her fingers. He said you confessed to him. He told us you were angry, that you wanted revenge." My throat tightened. "And you believed him? After everything he's done?" She looked up at me, her eyes wet. "You don't understand, Althea. Marcus takes care of us. He takes care of Mom and Dad. He's the one keeping the family together. And you—" She stopped, biting her lip. "And me?" I pressed. "You've always been different. Angry. You scare them sometimes." Her words sliced me open. I wanted to shout that my anger was born from years of being cast aside, scapegoated, erased. But I knew she wouldn't hear it. Marcus's voice was louder in her ears than mine ever could be. Still, there was something in the way her hands trembled, the way she couldn't meet my eyes. She knew more than she was saying. I leaned in. "Lydia, if Marcus is lying, if he's hiding something, and you keep covering for him, do you know what that makes you? An accomplice. Do you really want to carry that weight for the rest of your life?" Her face paled. She whispered, "I don't know anything." But her body betrayed her. The way she flinched at the word accomplice, the way she grabbed her bag and left without finishing her coffee. She knew, and she was terrified. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the length of my apartment, my mind buzzing with possibilities. If Marcus had convinced the whole family I was dangerous, then he had already won in their eyes. The only way to beat him was to expose him so publicly, so undeniably, that even his charm couldn't cover it. The more I thought about it, the more certain I became. The poison wasn't just a frame job. He had a plan. Maybe to use it on me. maybe to use it on someone else and let me take the fall. My gut twisted at the thought of my parents sitting at their dinner table, sipping from glasses Marcus had poured. I had to know what he was planning, so I followed him. It felt reckless, dangerous, like stepping back into the role of the scared little sister who trailed after him as a child, desperate to prove he was lying. But this time, I wasn't looking for my parents' approval. This time, I was looking for the truth. One evening, a week before the trust meeting, I parked my car down the street from his house. I watched as he loaded boxes into his trunk. He looked calm, casual, like a man preparing for a trip. But my heart raced as I noticed one of the boxes bore the faint stamp of a chemical company. I followed him to a warehouse on the outskirts of town. He carried the boxes inside, glancing over his shoulder once. I ducked low in my car, pulse hammering. After an hour, he emerged empty-handed, wiping his palms on his jeans. He drove away, and I forced myself to breathe again. The next day, I returned to that warehouse. The doors were locked, but the windows were grimy and cracked. I peered inside, and what I saw made my stomach churn. Shelves lined with bottles, chemicals, things I couldn't name but instinctively knew were dangerous. Marcus wasn't just trying to cut me out of the trust. He was stockpiling poison. For what purpose? I didn't yet know, but it was enough to confirm the nightmare swirling in my chest. I wasn't the only one in danger. I took photos, my hands shaking so badly half of them blurred. Still, I had something tangible. Proof that Marcus wasn't who he pretended to be. Proof that the bottles in my room weren't some isolated mistake. They were part of a larger scheme. But proof is fragile when you've spent your whole life being dismissed. I needed more. And then, fate delivered it to me in the form of my mother. She called me late one night, her voice trembling. "Althea," she whispered, "I don't know who else to call. Marcus. He's been acting strange. He keeps locking himself in the garage. I found a bottle under the sink, and it doesn't look right." Her words froze me. My mother, who had spent decades defending Marcus, was finally afraid of him. "Don't touch it," I told her. "Please, don't touch anything. I'll come tomorrow." When I arrived at their house, she led me to the kitchen. Her hands shook as she pointed to the cabinet. Inside was a small vial, nearly identical to the ones found in my room. It was the crack in Marcus's armor I had been waiting for. I took the vial, slipped it into a plastic bag, and drove straight to the detective. This time, when I placed the photos of the warehouse on the table, along with the vial from my mother's house, I saw his face change. Doubt gave way to concern. He said he'd look into it, but looking into it wasn't enough for me. I wanted Marcus exposed. I wanted him stripped of the power he had wielded over me my whole life. The day of the trust meeting arrived. I walked into that lawyer's office with my head held high, though my insides quaked. Marcus was already there, lounging in his chair, smirking like a king about to deliver his final decree. Lydia sat beside him, pale and anxious. My parents looked exhausted, worn down by years of Marcus's control. When the lawyer began speaking, Marcus interrupted, his voice dripping with false concern. "Before we go any further, I think we need to address the matter of Althea's instability. The police found poison in her apartment. I don't think it's safe or responsible for her to be included in these discussions." All eyes turned to me. For a heartbeat, I felt like I was 13 again, standing accused in the living room while Marcus lied with ease. But this time, I was ready. I pulled out the photos. I placed them on the table one by one, the images of the warehouse, the shelves lined with chemicals. I pulled out the plastic bag with the vial from my mother's house, and finally, I produced a copy of the security footage. Still, Marcus caught on camera entering my apartment with that bag. "This," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me, "is the truth. Marcus planted poison in my room to frame me. He's been stockpiling more in a warehouse. He's been hiding bottles in this very house. If you don't believe me, ask the police. They're investigating now." The room went silent. My mother gasped. My father's face turned ashen. Lydia covered her mouth with trembling hands. And Marcus laughed. That chilling, infuriating laugh that had haunted me all my life. "You're delusional, Althea. They'll never believe you. They never have." But for the first time, I saw doubt flicker in my parents' eyes, and in that flicker, I saw something I had never dared to hope for. A chance. The laugh Marcus gave still echoes in my head like a thunderclap. It wasn't just amusement. It was defiance, arrogance, the kind of sound that dared anyone in the room to challenge him. For a moment, I thought my evidence might crumble under the weight of his confidence, just like it always had when we were children. He was the golden boy, the charming one, the liar, who spun webs so thick people got lost in them willingly. And I was the scapegoat, the bitter one, the sister whose words never carried enough weight. But this time, something shifted. I watched as my mother's trembling hands reached for the photo of the warehouse. Her lips parted as if she wanted to deny it, but no words came out. My father, normally so stoic, pressed a hand to his forehead, his shoulders slumping under the heaviness of the image. Lydia sat frozen, her eyes darting between me and Marcus like a rabbit trapped between two hunters. "Marcus," my father finally said, his voice low but sharp. "What is this?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, feigning offense. "Dad, you know me. Do you really think I'd be stupid enough to stockpile poison? Come on." Althea's trying to spin another story. She's always been jealous, always looking for ways to make me look bad. But his words didn't land the way they used to. There was a crack in his performance, subtle, but there. I could feel it. The more he tried to brush it off, the more the unease in the room grew. The lawyer cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "Perhaps we should postpone this discussion until these matters are resolved legally." I jumped in before Marcus could take control again. "No, that's what he wants. He wants to drag this out until he's already erased me from everything. Look at the footage. Look at the vial from Mom's house. Ask yourself why Marcus was in my apartment the night before the police showed up. Ask yourself why poison keeps showing up wherever I am. For once, no one rushed to shut me down. No one told me I was overreacting." My mother's voice cracked as she whispered, "Marcus, did you really go to Althea's apartment?" His jaw tightened. "I went to check on her." "She's unstable, Mom. I was worried." But his eyes flicked to me, sharp as knives, and I knew he could see it too. The walls were closing in. That night, I left the meeting shaken, but strangely hopeful. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was the first time in years that Marcus hadn't walked away completely unscathed. The following days were tense. The police called me in again, this time not to interrogate me, but to ask more about Marcus. They had raided the warehouse I'd shown them and confirmed the presence of chemicals. "Some of them are restricted substances," the detective told me, his face grave. "We're still investigating what he planned to do with them." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like I could breathe. But relief was fleeting, because Marcus wasn't the type to go down quietly, and I knew, deep in my bones, that he would come for me before anyone else could stop him. It happened sooner than I expected. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of glass shattering. My apartment, quiet as a tomb for weeks, suddenly alive with chaos. I stumbled out of bed, heart pounding, and saw a shadow moving in the living room. "Marcus," I whispered, though no one was there to hear. I grabbed the nearest thing I could, a heavy lamp, and crept closer. The shadow loomed near the window, and when the figure turned, the streetlight caught his face. It was him. His eyes burned with fury, stripped of all charm. "You ruined everything," he hissed. My grip tightened on the lamp. "You did that yourself." He took a step toward me, and for the first time in my life I saw Marcus without the mask, without the smile, without the sweet lies. He looked feral, desperate. "You think anyone's going to believe you? You think you're going to take this family from me?" "This family?" I snapped. "All you've ever done is use them. Manipulate them, poison them, literally. You don't love them. You love control." His jaw clenched. "Control is the only thing that matters. And if I can't have it..." He glanced at the kitchen, at the drawers where I knew the bottles had once been. My stomach dropped. I realized then that Marcus hadn't just come to scare me. He'd come to finish what he started. But before he could make another move, red and blue lights flashed outside my window. Sirens wailed, cutting through the night like salvation. He froze, his face a mask of rage and disbelief. The police burst in seconds later, guns drawn, voices commanding. Marcus raised his hands, but his eyes never left mine. They cuffed him, dragged him out, and as he passed me, he leaned close enough for only me to hear. "This isn't over, Althea. You'll regret this." Even as they shoved him into the patrol car, his words burrowed into me like thorns. The aftermath was a blur. The police confirmed the chemicals in the warehouse were dangerous, potentially lethal if mixed. They said Marcus had been trying to acquire more under fake names. My parents were questioned. Lydia, too. Suddenly, the golden boy's shine was gone, replaced by headlines about a man arrested for possession of toxins. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt free. But instead, I felt hollow. Because the truth was, even with Marcus behind bars, the damage he'd done lingered. My family was shattered, my reputation scarred. The whispers didn't stop overnight. Some people still looked at me with suspicion, as if guilt clung to me just because it always had. And my parents? They didn't call me right away. They didn't come rushing with apologies or comfort. For weeks there was silence, the kind of silence that reminded me of childhood, of being left alone while they doted on Marcus and Lydia. Except now the silence carried shame. It was Lydia who reached out first. She came to my apartment, her face pale and drawn, her eyes swollen from crying. "I'm sorry," she whispered the moment I opened the door. "I should have believed you. I knew Marcus was lying. I didn't want it to be true." Her apology cracked something in me I didn't realize I'd been holding together. I let her in. And for hours we sat on my couch, unraveling years of secrets and half-truths. She admitted how Marcus had manipulated her too, how he used fear to keep her loyal. For the first time, I saw my little sister not as the princess who had everything, but as another victim caught in his web. Forgiving her wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Eventually, my parents called. My father's voice was heavy with guilt. "We failed you, Althea. We should have protected you. We should have believed you." I wanted to scream, to ask where that belief was when I was a child, when Marcus blamed me for everything, but I didn't, because in their voices, I heard something I had waited my whole life for. Acknowledgement. It wasn't redemption, not yet, but it was a start. Marcus remained in jail while the investigation stretched on, but his words haunted me. This isn't over. And maybe he was right. Maybe his shadow would always linger. But for the first time, I realized I wasn't powerless. I wasn't the scapegoat anymore. One evening, as I stood on my balcony watching the sunset bleed across the sky, I thought about everything that had led me here. The lies, the betrayal, the years of being silenced. And now, the fragile threads of vindication finally starting to weave into something whole. I knew this story wasn't over, not yet, but I also knew I had survived the worst of it. And survival was its own kind of victory. When Marcus was finally brought to trial, I felt like I was walking into a theater where my whole life had been a rehearsal, and now, at last, the curtain was up. The courthouse smelled of dust and old wood, but to me, it smelled like reckoning. I sat on the hard bench, my palms slick, my heart thrumming in my ears, as lawyers shuffled papers and bailiffs barked orders. My parents sat a few rows behind me, Lydia clutching my mother's hand, their faces pale as chalk. When Marcus was let in, wearing that orange jumpsuit, chains rattling at his wrists, I almost didn't recognize him. The arrogance was still there, but it had cracked. His hair wasn't perfectly styled. His eyes darted too quickly around the room, searching for someone to believe him, someone to shield him. For the first time, he looked small. The prosecution laid out everything. The vials of poison found in my apartment, the warehouse stockpiled with chemicals, the vial my mother had discovered in her own kitchen. They played the security footage of Marcus entering my apartment with that bag. They called witnesses who had unknowingly sold him restricted substances under fake names. Piece by piece, the image of the golden boy was dismantled until only the rot underneath remained. When it was my turn to testify, my legs shook so badly I thought they might give out. But as I took the stand and swore to tell the truth, I felt something anchor me. Maybe it was the weight of all the years I had been silenced. Maybe it was the presence of Lydia, who gave me a shaky nod from her seat. Maybe it was simply the knowledge that this was my moment to reclaim everything Marcus had stolen from me. I told them everything about my childhood, the endless scapegoating, the way Marcus had lied and my parents had believed him, about the night he came to my apartment with false sweetness and hidden malice, about waking to police pounding on my door, their voices filling my home with accusations, about the fear, the humiliation, the whispers that clung to me like smoke. And then I told them about the warehouse, the photos, the vial my mother had found. My voice cracked when I said, "He didn't just try to frame me. He was planning something bigger, something dangerous, and if he had succeeded, it wouldn't just be me destroyed, it would be all of us." The courtroom was silent when I stepped down. For once, no one rushed to discredit me. No one told me I was dramatic, unstable, jealous. For once, my words hung in the air with the weight they deserved. The defense tried, of course. They painted me as bitter, vengeful, mentally unstable. They said I fabricated the story to get back at Marcus for being the favored child. But their words fell flat against the mountain of evidence. Marcus's charm, his easy lies, couldn't cover the truth anymore. The verdict came after 2 days of deliberation. Guilty. On multiple counts. When the judge read the sentence, Marcus turned to look at me. His eyes burned with the same fury I had seen the night he broke into my apartment. But behind it, there was something else. Fear. For once, Marcus was the one losing everything. Walking out of that courthouse, I felt like I was breathing air for the first time. The sky seemed bluer, the ground more solid under my feet. People looked at me differently, not as the troubled one, not as the scapegoat, but as someone who had survived the fire and walked out carrying the truth. But victory didn't erase the scars. My parents tried, in their halting way, to mend what had been broken. They invited me to dinner, spoke words of regret, promised they would never doubt me again. And though I appreciated it, part of me couldn't forget the years of silence, the way they had let Marcus's lies define me. Forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip. It was a slow, uneven road. Lydia, though. Lydia surprised me. She began to visit often, sometimes with nothing more than a cup of coffee and a willingness to sit in silence. We started untangling the knots Marcus had tied around us, sharing stories we had never dared to speak aloud. For the first time, she wasn't just my sister. She was my ally. Still, there were nights I woke in a sweat, hearing his voice. This isn't over. And maybe it never would be. Not completely. Marcus's shadow would always linger in the corners of my memory, a reminder of how close I had come to losing everything. But slowly, I began to rebuild. I found a new job, one where people knew me not as the woman accused of poison, but as Althea, competent and strong. I moved to a different apartment, one with wide windows that let in the morning light. I filled it with plants, with books, with pieces of myself that had been buried under fear. One evening, months after the trial, I stood on my balcony again. The air was cool, the city humming quietly below me. I thought about the girl I had been, the girl who tried so hard to earn love that was never given, who swallowed lies until she could no longer tell where the truth began. And I thought about the woman I had become, the woman who had faced betrayal head-on, who had fought for her voice, who had refused to be erased. The story of the poison wasn't just about Marcus, it was about me. About learning that I could survive being buried under lies, that I could claw my way back into the light. About realizing that family isn't just blood, it's truth, it's accountability, It's the ones who stand beside you when the world is burning. I wish I could say the pain is gone, that the scars have faded, but maybe they're not supposed to. Maybe they're reminders that betrayal can come from the ones closest to us, that silence can wound as deeply as cruelty, but also that survival is possible, that reclaiming your voice is worth every battle, every scar. So when people ask me about the story, when they lean in with wide eyes and whisper, "Is it true the police found poison in your room?" I smile, not because it was easy, not because it didn't almost destroy me, but because I can finally answer with strength in my voice. Yes, they did. But I never bought it, and I never let it define me. And if you've made it this far, if you've listened to my story, I hope you take something from it. I hope you remember that no matter how many lies are piled against you, no matter how many people try to bury your truth, you have the right to fight back. You have the right to stand tall. You have the right to survive. If this story touched you, if you've ever felt silenced or betrayed and fought to reclaim your voice, I ask you to share it. Leave a comment below. I want to hear your story too. And if you want to walk with me through more of these journeys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because our voices matter. And no one, no golden child, no liar, no betrayer can take that away from us.